Welcome to the Build with Boundaries podcast. My name is Manaz, and this podcast is for mums who want to carve out time so that you can work in ways that work for you, your life, your family, and of course your business. Together, we will discover why you are not prioritising your business and the actions that you can take so you can live an intentional, productive, and fulfilled life without mum guilt. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome everyone. I am delighted to introduce my special guest today, and I would like you to meet Sarah Evans. She's a coach, facilitator and catalyst for personal transformation in business owners and leaders who want to create success built on values. Her unique approach offers a simple strategy for empowering you to bring personal and business goals to life through profound breakthroughs and actionable steps in a friendly and accessible way. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for being my guest. Delighted to have you on Build with Boundaries podcast, and today we're talking about how to connect with your why when building your passion business. So do say hello to the listeners and tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here, Manaz. Thanks for inviting me. So I kind of got into coaching using values because I discovered like how powerful it was for myself, and then did more work on creating a system that uses values at its base, and it can be used in lots of different ways, but I particularly like to help business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are making a change in their careers, that kind of time when you need to reassess and think what suits you, who you are, and the direction that you want to go in.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like that's a great time to sort of pause and reflect and really realign and kind of look at what's purposeful and what's meaningful for you. So I love that. So let's talk about how we can do this, because we want to use our values, right? We might not necessarily be aware what they are, but they give us so much clarity, don't they? And can you explain how does that work? Because for most people, we just think of values as values, but can you sort of give us your perspective on what they really are?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because this whole idea of finding your why, particularly in business, Simon Sinek sort of came up with the idea about starting with why and what drives you, what your purpose is. And I think we can take for granted sometimes that we know what that is. So we kind of find the things that we've always done or the things that we've done really well, and we tend to stick in that lane. But actually when you think about values, it's not just aspirational. So quite often people have values that they want to have. So a really common one is when I do the work is people will have family as one of their core values at the start. And then when we actually dig into it, it's not, family isn't something that drives them. It's just something that obviously is important to them. And it's that difference. So your core values are the values that drive you, where you have no choice over it. They're kind of set by a young age. And then we adapt, they're in a positive and a negative stance to the values throughout our lives. So it's really important to know what they are and really do that work to uncover them, I think.
Yeah, that's so important what you said, that they're kind of inherent to us and we don't necessarily recognise them, and because of external pressures and the way we grow up, we think we need to have certain things, and that's maybe where the aspirational stuff comes from, because it's one of those things that we should have this, and we should it's important to have family as a value, for example. So that's really helpful for all of us to think about, really, to see what we consider to be our values. Are they actually our true core values or not? And that's obviously the work that you do, is going really deep into finding out what the root of your values are and what the essence of you is. So I love how you've explained that. And how can they then be used to understand what drives you and help you to then, obviously you want to prioritise things in your life, and at different stages in life, different priorities will have an emphasis. But how can you use this work? So once you actually figure out what they are, how can we put that into practice?
Yeah, so when we uncover the core values, the thing that I always explain is that you have your sort of core values in the centre that don't change, and then around that you've got your personal values, which can change obviously depending on what stage of life you're in, and your social values, etc. So the values are always around us, but when you understand the core values, you can start to prioritise. So, for example, and I, kind of use myself as an example. One of my top value really that came out is honesty, which wasn't a huge surprise because it was always a bit of a family joke that I couldn't tell a lie to save my life, and honesty was always really important to me. But what I didn't understand was the other side of values is that you need to be in an environment where honesty is fostered, and that's what's important. So, for example, a client that I know we both have worked with recently, who is in a very caring profession and really wants to help other people, and so that is one of her core values. But actually, what that came out in was not having boundaries in place, not being able to prioritise her caring for family members, for example, alongside caring for her clients and for her business. So once you know that that's a driving value, you can then start to do the work to understand, how to prioritise, how to create boundaries, what things that you're doing that are having a negative impact on your work or on your personal situation. So it really brings clarity to that, I think.
So it really highlights and makes it clear what we might not realise as being a higher priority in terms of we need to deal with this. Like, we can, in terms of boundaries, we can always be quite resistant to setting those up. But if you understand your values, then you might be much more willing to protect those values because they actually are really inherent in you, and they would make a big difference in terms of you feeling like they're honoured, I guess, in some way, in respecting those values. And I love how, and I'd love to go back to something you said before. You talked about like each value almost has like a scale. I think that'd be really interesting to talk about. It's almost like you've got honesty, and it can have like a, I don't know what you might call it, but I'm thinking like a shadow side and a almost like a really positive side. So there's like this scale, and we could be anywhere, sitting anywhere. And what I love is what you're explaining is that this can be stuff that's we are thinking and it's affecting us, but it can also be things that other people are doing that we're seeing that are affecting us. So it kind of has this double-edged sword that our core value is always going to be something that we want to protect it, right? Because it's so important to us. And how does that scale work, and how do you explain that? Because I'm sure you've got your way of sharing that with others. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to what we sort of traditionally call like your gut instinct. And I think if we're all really honest, we ignore our gut instinct a lot of the time. And so thinking of it in a work environment, which is primarily how the situations where I'm working with clients, we've all had that experience of being in a job, and you're feeling really demotivated, or you're feeling you're stressed, you're burnt out, and when you look at those, the impact of being in an environment that's not matching your values, it really does affect you mentally, physically, emotionally. So once you know what those values are, again, you've got that clarity, you can start to protect yourself. So I mean, boundaries, one of the ways I talk about it is protection. So actually you are putting protections in place for your values so that you can feel more confident making decisions and saying no to things. It really helps with people pleasing, because we think that if we if we try to please people or do what we think we should do, then that's going to make the situation better. And often it doesn't, because actually we need to listen to ourselves. But when you've got that foundation of clarity to stand on, and so you understand why certain things are important to you, you've then got more confidence to actually address it with other people.
So ultimately, what that gives us is some level of permission that this is important to us, and we can give ourselves permission to let go of stuff that doesn't feel good and doesn't actually align with our values. So almost like creating a bit of a guide, like a personal guide, because it can be a nice check-in for us, can't it, if we know what they are, but it's really understanding them. I think that is the trouble, because we're in such a busy world just now that we're constantly like affected, and I think you mentioned this before, like as we're not trusting our gut anymore as much. And I think when we look at children, our own kids and children as in the whole generation, they're all like taught in a way to stop listening to their gut very, very early on, because it's about what's outside and what other people are saying, and it's not about listening to us inside. So this is so relevant, because I think in this day and age, especially even after lockdown, there's so many businesses who have changed the way they do things. They didn't feel right, they had to change for different reasons, and again that brings the whole, like, we can make those changes when we know what our values are. We can make those decisions easier. Is that what you find then, that people are making those decisions without it feeling as difficult and as traumatic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of there are two things that most people say when they've done this work. One is that they make sense of who they are, things make sense. They understand why they have felt certain ways in situations, or why they've struggled, to make decisions in different situations. And the other thing is having that clarity is like a weight being lifted off your shoulders. Because an example of a lady that I worked with who was a senior manager, and she was so stressed and unhappy in her role because her boss quite often would just kind of drop work on her last minute and expect it to be turned around really quickly. And I think we've all experienced that sort of situation. But what this lady then understood, once she knew that one of her core values was caring,
right.
And the downside, we've talked about that positive and negative, the downside of caring is, caring too much, or continuing to care too much in situations where you're not getting anything back. There's no caring coming back to you. And so once we'd done this work, that conflict, or that was internal, just literally disappeared overnight, and she was able to actually talk to her boss, discuss why she was feeling so stressed from a very reasoned position, because she understood why she was feeling like that, and her boss really took it on board, and they figured out a way to kind of make it work better. But so it's just really having that clarity, like you say, gives permission to feel confident about the decisions that you're making and the choices that you make, which particularly when you're starting, a business or building a business on your own, you've got to trust, you haven't got someone else to really bounce those ideas off so much. So you need to be able to trust yourself.
Yeah, which is very difficult when you're working on your business on your own, and everybody knows that. So it's kind of like even more important from what you're saying for us to get it right as a solopreneur, because it affects us personally, but it also affects our business. And I think what's fascinating in what you said is that just knowing and just that awareness piece is like making sense of things. It actually takes that pressure off. It's like, makes you more confident, but also like relaxed in a way that you actually understand, why you feel that way, and you don't need to deal with the drama that goes along with it, where you get really stressed out because of it, because you're able to kind of place that. So I think that's really important to share. So thanks for sharing that example. I think it shows that when somebody can come into this kind of situation with their values on board and really buy into the whole, like they need to understand them, then the benefits are very hard to see when you haven't done the values work.
Yeah.
I think it's that kind of, would you agree with that? And once you have it, just having that awareness and clarity is like making sense of yourself and who you are. And I think something you mentioned before, because I think you're great at doing this, is like connecting all the different parts of your life so far. It's almost like, you know, seeing your values play out in your life, because if they are your core values, they have been there for a very long time, but just you haven't realised that they were there. Could you share anything on that side of things? Because that's really fascinating when, you know, I'm sure it is for you when you're doing work with clients, and I know you love that side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this stems from my background. Originally was working in film and TV with scripts and story development, producing, writing, all of those things. So I've kind of developed characters. I've like studied people in sort of character form forever. So it really helps working with clients, because what I do with the values, which is quite unique, I think, is get people to look at examples of, you know, stories and events from their life, and then I can kind of see the evidence of the values at play. So the values that you highlight as important, we can look at the stories and you see it. So in the best times in your life, you've got your core values are being met and nurtured, and in the worst times in your life, those core values aren't, and that's why they are the worst times. Even in situations that, you know, have nothing to do with us in terms of, you know, bereavements, etc., you know, things that are out of our control, even being able to understand your reaction to it comes from your values and why certain things are important to you. And we're all unique, so some of the values work that I see, which is, you know, just selecting values from a list, it's not deep enough. It doesn't go deep enough. So when you go deeper, you really understand, and then that, you know, kind of gives your brain the evidence that those values are your values, and so you can always come back to it. Like you said before, you know, it gives you that roadmap, or like a GPS where you can just kind of press recenter when you get lost, come back, and
that's a great way to put it. That is fantastic, Sarah. Yeah, definitely, we can all see that. And I think ultimately what this is doing is it's saying that by taking that pressure off us and understanding ourselves better, we know then how to use ourselves better, which then ultimately means we're being more productive. Because if we aren't, you know, using our energy in the best way, then that's where we're not quite sure, we're not quite confident, and, you know, I feel like the values has quite a big part to play with that.
Yeah, and as you know, business mums, we've got so many priorities that are battling, you know, for our time. So if you've got, you know, a way to actually come back and look and think, okay, the reason that I'm feeling so stressed is because one of my values is out of kilter. So you can look at the values, knowing why they're there and why they're important to you, and work out, you know, the part that is giving you kind of issues at that time. The power of it is that it gives you agency, you know, it gives you the ability to make decisions on how to deal with a situation. It doesn't magically, you know, get rid of those situations, but it gives you the power to make those decisions, and that's what we need, you know, and being able to kind of go to something that quickly gives you a decision and reliably gives you a decision as somebody in business on your own is really priceless, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it is, definitely, and there are so many decisions to be made all the time, and if we're always like checking in, then it just gives us, it's like having a tool that helps us to get the best out of us. And, you know, that is exactly what we want, right? We want that for ourselves, we want that for our children, we want that for everyone to be sitting at their potential.
Yeah.
So if somebody's thinking about, you know, this sounds all great, but practically, like, how can I even start doing this? Have you got something you can share with the listeners, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a kind of introduction to the core values discovery. So the work that I do with clients, usually over a few hours, you know, because we go quite deep. But I have a workbook that you can use and start to go through that process yourself, so you can understand the process that I use. And even just doing that alone gives you a lot more insight into your values and what they are than currently. There's no doubt about it. So obviously your listeners will be able to get hold of that and have a go at it themselves and see what comes up. It's always quite interesting.
It is indeed. I will pop the link in the show notes and in the YouTube description so you can get Sarah's value discovery for free. And last but not least, I think what would be really good to share is that I know Sarah has already mentioned that we're working with a client, so we're working on a programme together, and it's called Harmony Quest. And this is where Sarah and I have partnered because we see this real connection between values and boundaries. So when somebody comes into Harmony Quest, they can work with Sarah to understand their values, which then helps us to start the Harmony Quest, where we're looking at what boundaries you need and helping to understand yourself better through the whole process, with the fact that you have your core values at hand. And also when we're then creating boundaries and thinking about things, having this at top of mind has been like priceless for the client we're working with just now. And we've already mentioned like the clarity piece, but I think it's so powerful to then understand and again navigate different decisions and things that, well, what would be best for this person as any client goes through, because their values are going to be unique. And doing this in a way where we're both partnering together just feels so appropriate. So we have gone, definitely full in on this, and we want to offer this together. So if you're interested to find out more about the Harmony Quest, then you can check that out at buildwithboundaries.com/harmony. And we're going to do another episode similar to this, and we're going to dig deeper into values, so do check out the next one. And there we're going to talk about the stress triggers and how you can manage them.